The Noble Eightfold Path of Buddhism is, simply put, the path to Nirvana. It is the fourth noble truth, and more importantly, it is the teaching put into practice. To walk this path all the way is to reach awakening and liberation. The Buddha did not leave behind vague instructions on how to reach nirvana. He did not make general statements like being a good person, living in harmony, or having faith. No. The Noble Eightfold Path is a detailed, step-by-step guide on how exactly to perfect your life and transform your mind. You would think there's nothing more exciting than learning this guide. Sadly, most study resources on the path are either superficial or boring. They usually start with an image like this one. They list the 8 components of the path, and perhaps they tell you it is divided into 3 sections: ethics, mental practice, and wisdom. Then they go on to tell you what you shouldn't do and what you should do. This can be off-putting and uninspiring, which makes it misleading too. The Buddha's original teachings had the opposite effect of drawing in his listeners. Many became his lifelong disciples after hearing just a single talk. If learning about the path does not shake your entire worldview, you're not learning it right. So let me try something different. I want to let the Buddha present the Eightfold Path to you. I'll do this by telling you a story, not one I made up, but a Buddhist sutta dating back some 22 centuries. It's the Shorter Elephant Footprint Simile Sutta. I know, not the catchiest title, but it helped catalog and memorize the canon when the tradition was still oral. In fact, this is one of the most fascinating texts I've ever read. Here we find the Buddha himself presenting the Eightfold Noble Path to an outsider. The outsider comes confused, uncertain whether the Buddha is a true teacher or a fake guru. At the end of the sutta, he is no longer confused. In any case, I'll interrupt the story frequently to give you some commentary and context to what the Buddha is saying. I hope this will be useful. Now let's hear about this path of the Buddha from the Buddha. I present to you the Shorter Elephant Footprint Simile Sutta. One day, the Brahmin Janasonan was traveling in his chariot. It happened that he came across a friend of his, the wanderer Pilataka. After the two men exchanged greetings, Pilataka said he had just been in the presence of the teacher Gautama. Gautama, of course, was the one whom people called the Awakened One, the Buddha. He had been causing quite the excitement lately with his talks. Being of the priest caste, Janasonan was well versed in the philosophy and religion of the time. He had learned not to get too excited about gurus, as new ones kept popping up all the time. Each, of course, claimed to possess ultimate knowledge. So Janasonan asked his friend, "How do you judge him, Pilataka? Is this Gautama as wise as they say?" "I am not nearly as wise as him to judge of his wisdom," Pilataka answered. "This is high praise coming from you," Janasonan said. And his friend replied, "Who am I to praise Gautama? He is praised by those we praise as the best of beings, human and divine." This piqued Janasonan's interest. It probably annoyed him a little too. "Come now," he said, "how can you be that certain of the man's wisdom?" Pilataka was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Suppose an elephant hunter was to enter the forest and was to see there a large elephant footprint. By this, he would know a great bull elephant lives in the forest. In the same way, I saw not one, but 4 footprints in the teacher Gautama. Thus, I came to understand he is truly self-awakened. He teaches the true path correctly, and his disciples practice rightly. Let me tell you of these 4 footprints, Pallottaka continued. I saw great intellectuals, skilled in debate, like hair-splitting marksmen. They seek and destroy philosophical positions for sport. When they learn the teacher Gautama is visiting a village or a town, they make ready to attack his teaching. They prepare their questions and anticipate his answers. On every point, they prepare arguments against Gautama. They go to him then, and he gives them a talk on the Dhamma. When he's done speaking, they don't even ask him their questions. As it turns out, they become his disciples. I saw such intellectuals from the warrior caste, from the priest caste, from the householder caste, and from among the contemplatives too. In all 4 cases, the wisest among the wise were left speechless. They left their homes and families and followed Gautama. These are the 4 footprints I saw. Yanasonin was rather intrigued by this tale. Perhaps he felt somewhat challenged too. After all, he himself was a man of learning. Could this Gautama really be so smart and wise? Yanasonin thanked his friend and decided he must visit the teacher himself. Okay, let's pause here. What are you doing right now? You're watching this video to learn about the Buddha's teaching. Perhaps you're like Yanasonin, a newcomer who wants to see what Buddhism is all about. Or maybe you're like those intellectuals who seek weak points in the Dhamma. I imagine these like ancient Indian versions of Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris. Or perhaps you're like Pallottaka, already convinced of the Buddha's wisdom and you're here for sheer enjoyment of the Dhamma. In any case, this story begins with you and me. It starts with all of us elephant hunters who enter the forest in search of truth. Yanasonin is us. His meeting with Pallottaka is the elephant footprint he discovers. Perhaps this video is the same footprint for you. Now back to the story. We pick up sometime later when Yanasonin has made his way to the Buddha. Many blessings upon you, Yanasonin said, and bowed to the famous teacher. The 2 men exchanged greetings and courtesies, all according to etiquette. Then Yanasonin sat by Gautama. He told the teacher of his conversation with Pallottaka, recounting each word carefully. When he finished, he fell silent. He couldn't remember whether he had a question he wished to ask. In a few moments, it was Gautama who spoke. The teacher said, Pallottaka's simile of the elephant footprint is incomplete. I will complete it for you. Listen closely. Yanasonin was taken aback. He had expected some reaction from Gautama regarding Pallottaka's praise, some boasting maybe, or some humility, at least anything. But Gautama simply began to teach. He said, if an elephant hunter enters a forest, he might see a large elephant footprint. But if he is a skilled hunter, he will not conclude there is a large bull elephant in the forest. A skilled hunter would know there are small elephant females with exceedingly large feet. The footprint could be one of theirs. So the skilled hunter follows the footprint into the forest. There he might find 3 more footprints, scratch marks, tusk slashes, and some broken off branches. Still, he will not conclude there is a bull elephant in the forest. A smaller elephant could have left those. But if the hunter continues following the tracks, He might arrive with a bull elephant at the foot of a tree or in an open clearing. Only then does he conclude, there is a bull elephant. Let's pause again. How has the Buddha improved Pilatika's simile? Well, we see in Pilatika a somewhat superficial form of spirituality. You know, the kind where one hears or reads something and decides immediately it is the ultimate truth. Lesser teachers welcome such easy converts. The Buddha, however, would have none of that. His extended simile tells us we shouldn't be satisfied with outer appearances. A footprint is not enough. We should actually enter the forest ourselves, follow the tracks, and make sure we see the truth with our own eyes. We should settle for nothing less than the actual elephant. And here we arrive at the Noble Eightfold Path. We will hear now the Buddha describe the full journey of the early Buddha's disciples. But I have to warn you, it is easy to get discouraged when you hear what dedication the Buddha expects of us. It is one thing to meditate for letting off steam. It is a whole different game to leave your family and friends in search of awakening. The path to Nirvana can sometimes sound so demanding as to be totally out of reach. But imagine Rafael Nadal comes to teach you tennis, or Nancy Green comes to teach you to ski. You wouldn't get discouraged. You wouldn't compare yourself to the master. You would try to learn a thing or two that will serve your own improvement. This is a good way to approach the Buddha's teachings too. As Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi says, there are only two things you must do on the path. You must start and you must continue. With this in mind, let's now hear the Buddha describe the path to Janasonin. A self-awakened teacher appears in the world, Gautama continued. He teaches the Dhamma in detail and in essence. A householder, upon hearing the Dhamma, reflects on his own life. He sees how difficult it is to live at home a holy life, perfect as a polished shell. After much deliberation, he decides to abandon his wealth, be it great or small. He leaves his relatives and friends, shaves, puts on a robe, and enters a life of homelessness. No wonder the early schools of Buddhism came to be called Hinayana, or the small vehicle. The original Buddhist path was not for the many, only for the dedicated few. We would probably call it elitist nowadays. If you want the extraordinary result of nirvana, you must put in the extraordinary effort of renouncing all of your comforts. But let's continue. This householder who left his possessions and family, the Buddha said, is trained in the rules of the order. He practices right view and right intention. His mind is set straight by the Dhamma he encountered. His view is right, and his thoughts are right. Thus he embarks upon the wisdom section of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view and right intention are two steps on the path to nirvana. He receives wisdom when he encounters the Dhamma, a wisdom that sets him on a trajectory to nirvana. Let's pause here. What happens next? What does our early Buddhist disciple do next? Having obtained right view and right intention, he sets out to perfect his virtue. Abandoning the taking of life, the Buddha said, he refrains from taking life. He dwells with his rod laid down and his knife laid down, scrupulous, merciful, and compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he refrains from taking what is not given. Abandoning unchastity, he lives a celibate life, set apart, avoiding the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. Abandoning false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks the truth, holds to the truth, is firm, reliable, no deceiver of the world. Abandoning malicious speech, he refrains from malicious speech. He is not a repeater elsewhere of what is heard here for the purpose of causing division. Abandoning harsh speech, he refrains from harsh speech. He speaks words that are gentle, soothing to the ear, and which go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. Abandoning gossip, he refrains from gossip. He speaks in season, speaks what is factual, what is in accordance with the goal. He speaks about what is Dhamma, what is the discipline. At a proper time, he speaks words worth recording, reasoned, definite, and connected with the goal. Abandoning intoxication, he refrains from taking intoxicants. Mindful and alert, he is composed and aware. This is how the householder perfects his virtue by way of right action, right speech, and right livelihood. He is of service to the people. He lives a harmonious life in the world, a life free of trouble and bad conscience. This ethical life is the foundation on which he will build further practice of the Dhamma. Let's pause again. How does your own life compare to the life of this disciple? Remember, right view and right intention, as we mentioned before, is the wisdom section of the Noble Eightfold Path. What we heard just now is the ethics section. It consists of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. The emphasis is on abandoning old, unskillful habits and acquiring new skillful ones. Notice the number of abstentions. When it comes to speech alone, we heard 5 different abstentions the disciple must practice. This tells us how difficult it is to speak rightly. I don't know about you, but this simple recollection of the early disciples' practice serves me as a great reality check. But let's continue. Next, the Buddha said, the disciple perfects his mental discipline. Having undertaken these precepts, he guards his sense faculties. Having seen a form with the eye, he does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unskillful qualities of longing and dejection might assail him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye faculty and undertakes its restraint. Having heard a sound with the ear, having smelled an odor with the nose, having tasted a flavor with the tongue, having felt a tactile sensation with the body, having cognized a mental phenomenon with the intellect, he does not grasp at its signs and features. He practices the restraint of all sense faculties. He is inwardly sensitive to the pleasure of renunciation. He is free of longing, free of dejection. He acts with clear awareness when going forward and returning, when looking toward and looking away, when flexing and extending his limbs. He acts with clear awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting. He acts with clear awareness when defecating and urinating, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and remaining silent. He is mindful, alert, composed, and aware. He abandons the 5 hindrances, those defilements of awareness that weaken discernment. This is how he is of service to his mind. The ethics section of the path is thus complemented by the mental discipline section. This section consists of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The disciple puts forth great effort to protect his mind from unwholesome thoughts and emotions. He practices mindfulness throughout the day. He engages in formal meditation, which brings great clarity. Let's continue. Having abandoned these 5 hindrances, the Buddha said, he enters and remains in the first jhana. This jhana is experienced as rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. He drenches, steeps, fills, and permeates his body with rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal. This noble disciple enters and remains in the second jhana. This jhana is experienced as rapture and pleasure, born of composure, free from directed thought and evaluation, with internal assurance. He drenches, steeps, fills, and permeates his body with rapture and pleasure, born of composure. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born of composure. This noble disciple enters and remains in the third jhana. This jhana is experienced as pleasure devoid of rapture, imbued with a feeling of peace and body. He drenches, steeps, fills, and permeates his body with pleasure devoid of rapture. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by pleasure, devoid of rapture. This noble disciple enters and remains in the fourth jhana. This jhana is experienced as pure equanimity and mindfulness, devoid of pleasure and pain. He sits permeated in pure, bright awareness. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by pure, bright awareness. This is how the disciple is of service to his meditation practice. These meditative attainments the Buddha describes are called the 4 jhanas. They are states of deep concentration and bliss. Notice how the joy gets subtler with each subsequent jhana. This process is a progression of subtlety, of abandoning the gross and entering the refined. This is right concentration. We now see the Noble Eightfold Path in full. It begins with wisdom, continues with ethics, and culminates in mental discipline. Its steps, which we heard in turn, are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The story of Yanosonen's meeting with the Buddha thus ends with a detailed presentation of the path to Nirvana. This story is not meant to convert you immediately, just as it was not meant to convert Yanosonen immediately. But if we are wise elephant hunters, we will follow the footprints deeper into the forest. We will see the small elephants with big feet, but we will also see the tracks, the tusk slashes, the scratch marks, the broken off branches. At some point, we will see the big bull elephant with our own eyes. The same holds for this path to Nirvana. If we follow it with diligence and dedication, with mindfulness and awareness, we will see the truth of the Buddha's words. And once we do, we will walk the path all the way to awakening. The journey is long and sometimes difficult, but the destination is worth every step.